Now, Louise, Meghan, back on to Meghan. She's taken a bit of a dive again in the polls, and she's been described as having a strange relationship with objective reality. That's pretty cutting and, well, one way of putting it. What's going on here?
Absolutely. That's been a pretty savage assessment of her truth-telling ability. So this has been triggered by a podcast interview which has been done with Vanessa Grigoriadis, who's a Vanity Fair writer. And she put together that 2018 piece about Meghan, largely based on an interview she had done with Samantha Markle, of course. And when she was being interviewed in a recent podcast, she was actually quite savage about Meghan's ability to tell the truth or recollection of the truth per se. And if you'll allow me, I'll read a bit of it, which says she has this warped reality and then she marshals evidence underneath it to support a thesis that may not be the case. So the problem for this, of course, is Meghan is all about the truth. And the truth for the rest of us is sort of facts and data and pretty much stuff that can be proven by a number of sources. But of course, Meghan wants truth to be something which makes her look good, or if it doesn't make her look good, then it's something she can attach her victimhood status to. So it's very interesting that sort of journalists and people who've been in her world or have looked at her life are questioning how she interprets events or how she recollects events, you know, her actual truth. I thought it was fascinating. I mean, savage, but very interesting to read.
And Louise, again, we'll move on to Charles this time. And it's common, obviously, we see portraits of the monarchs in government buildings, including here in Australia. However, the cost of Charles' new portraits has raised some eyebrows. They're a bit pricey, apparently.
Well, they're very pricey. I mean, the price that's been quoted is about 8 million quid, which is about $14 million Australian. And basically, all the schools, council halls, you name it, in the UK are being offered an opportunity to have these new portraits of King Charles in their halls and in their theatres and so forth. But of course, predictably, the pro-Republican movement is sort of saying, well, this is a waste of money, we're in a cost of living crisis, why are we spending 8 million quid on these portraits of Charles? But they can hardly keep the portraits in place of the Queen.
Yeah, and Soph, isn't this just part and parcel with a royal changeover? It's like a new government changing the stationery.
Well, Caroline, this is history in the making. This is the beginning of a new reign. This is significant and must be marked across the UK and, for that matter, the Commonwealth. So I think this is incredibly important that it does happen. You will always get those pro-Republicans that bag the monarchy in their financial spend. But we know how much the monarchy does mean to the UK and how much money, you know, it brings in every year. And I think this is very important that obviously the Queen, who has now died, you know, she's replaced with the portrait of the King, rightly so. It should happen in the UK and all across the Commonwealth. So I think this is something that should be welcome. But of course, criticism will always come with this.
Always. Now, Louise, Meghan Markle, we've got a positive Meghan story. She's apparently received a Gracie Award for her Spotify podcast. What does this mean for her and her profile?
Well, as you say, it's definitely a pro-Meghan story and a great result for her, and actually a real feather in her cap, because the Gracies are sort of seen as the creme de la creme of podcast awards, and given she got Best Entertainment Host for her interviews with Mariah Carey and Serena Williams and a few other of her sort of celeb chums, it is really a feather in her cap. It was awarded to by the Alliance for Women Media Foundation, and she's sort of in kind said, "Thank you very much for this great award. I'm so proud." So it's interesting, though. I find that someone who's been very critical of the media, of course, is now winning awards for being basically a media host, a podcast host. So it'll be interesting to see. I guess Spotify will be pleased that the significant investment they've made in Harry and Meghan is now reaping some return.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one last one before we go. Now, my mum used to have just a faultless death stare when she needed us kids to behave. And Kate has a code word for her kids. What's her approach?
So when they are up to a bit of mischief, which we saw last year at the Queen's Jubilee, when the youngest one was laughing and making a bit of noise at the Jubilee ceremony, she actually pulls them aside and quietly says, "Let's take a break." Now, that doesn't sound like harsh words to me, but it must frighten the 3 children of hers because they seem to sit up and listen and behave themselves. So it's something as simple as that Kate does, but her children seem to take notice and it pulls them into line. So whatever works, you may as well do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes her look like a normal mum, because we know that all mums, battle their children occasionally.